Welcome to Corwin's Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast with hosts Peter DeWitt and Michael Nelson. This podcast is from education leaders for education leaders. Every week, Peter, Mike, and our guests get together to share ideas, put research into practice, and ensure that every student is learning not by chance, but by design.
All right, welcome to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast, and this is going to be one with a twist. So, Sylvie Arseneau, welcome to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. Michael and I are excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to say welcome to your own podcast, Peter and Michael. And I'm absolutely, like I said before, absolument thrilled and deeply honored to have this opportunity to be with both of you in discussing your new upcoming book titled Lead Collectively, From Belief to Action to Impact. Congratulations to both of you on your new release. So I believe it's going to be in September, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, late September.
Yes, we're looking forward to it. Let's just jump into this. I'm very excited for this conversation. So many great reflections to be made relating to this book. So from the very first pages, it is apparent that your book is not just a leadership book. It is a call to action. I'm wondering about why did you feel this was the right time to write Lead Collectively? And also, how do you envision it supporting educational leaders at this time?
I guess I'll start with this, and then Michael will chime in for sure. So, it was really inspired by a lot of the work we're doing with you and New Brunswick. I remember last year, Mike and I were getting ready to present at the Visible Learning Conference for the first time. And one of the things that he said to me is, we've got collective leader efficacy, and we've really been researching that. But we have these 3 points: shared understanding, joint work, and evidence of impact. Have we really broken those down enough? And at the time, we were in the midst of doing a lot of work with all of you, and we had a couple of in-person workshops, and then we were trying to do virtual. And it just was a way for us, this book was a way for us to explore those 3 elements, along with how do people within New Brunswick build their leadership team and build capacity among their leadership team. And I think for me, what made it also different was when Michael and I wrote Leading with Intention, he was still working with the Washington Association of School Administrators. So he was doing a lot of putting the professional learning together, and then maybe I was facilitating. This time it was a combined work between the two of us. So we were really exploring this together. And he has such a systems level way of thinking that I don't necessarily have, because I was never a superintendent like he does. That it was also an opportunity for us to learn from one another. And that became really interesting. And we kind of pushed each other and challenged each other to go deeper. At the same time, we were looking at how do we engage leaders in New Brunswick and other places to a deeper level as well, because everybody had these challenges that they were working through, and it came down to what process can we go through to make sure that we're all going to that deep level. Michael, make me sound better.
Yeah, well, that's really hard to do, Peter. You sound better for sure, because you're wise, very wise in your words. I think, Sylvie, I don't know if I'm going to answer the question directly, but here's what I see powerful about the book. I see the book as being very bookended. So like from the introduction, you actually get to read, or the reader gets to read a story about team working together and the connection of that team working together around, Victoria Bernhardt's 4 types of data. And they're having that conversation. So it's almost like this, you're immediately, as as the person studying the book, you're thrown into, I'm a part of this team, and it leads right into then stories about the students that were important to us. And for me, it was Jimmy, and that really impactful um, student that I continue to hold in my head and heart as kind of my North Star in doing this work. And that those pieces of people working together, staff, adults working together on behalf of students, is bookended at the beginning, and then we share a story at the end of a school giving an example of working together with all the stakeholders, and we bring back the idea of the student in Jimmy. And in between those two bookends, or what Peter talks about, is how we have broken down the definition of collective leader efficacy into the three-legged stool of shared understanding, joint work, and evidence of impact. And we share it through research, what that research means, but we also share it through practical stories. And then we give the reader, just lots and lots of protocols that they could use with their teams.
Right. As a former vice principal, I know if I would have had that book in hand, I would have appreciated certainly the theory, but the practical piece of it and how is it guide to support schools, but not only schools, but schools, districts, even at the province level and their community and schools community. So just maybe you touched on that, but I'll still focus a little bit on the beginning of the book, which you are encouraging readers to engage with the content in using kind of two lenses. One of the lenses is focus on supporting their own growth, their personal growth as leaders. But also the second lens is to enhance their capacity to facilitate learning with others. So with these two lenses in mind, I'm a firm believer of being intentional. So with these two lenses in mind, what is your overall hope for leaders in reading this book?
That's a great question, and I'm afraid you're going to steal our job as the host of Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. One of the, I've been facilitating professional learning for a long time. And when I was a school principal, we did not go to a lot of professional learning. Like every time we went to something, it was really about how you need to get your teachers to do this. And it's not that that's not important, but the reality is over the years, there have been leaders who have just said, I feel like this is for us. And I guess that's the lens we're always going through, because too often they are going to professional learning that's not necessarily about their own learning, it's about somebody else's. And this is one of the ways that Michael's had a huge influence on me from a writing standpoint, because we did it with Leading with Intention, is to have spaces where leaders can really reflect on the work that they are doing and starting with them. So with this, it's about who are those students that have an impact on you, because even researchers like Tom Guskey have always said, think of student outcomes. And one of the things that Michael and I have done is really just thought about the students who have had an impact on us. And I think it's important for leaders to have that, but also going into how do you work with the people around you to develop that problem of practice that you want to be able to focus on. And we're even finding, whether it's our coaching work, and we do a lot of coaching, individual coaching, and then we of course work with a lot of teams. What we find is that even that language around problem of practice, you make an assumption that everybody understands and has done that work, but they haven't. So we just recently were together working in Washington State, and leaders hadn't really considered their school improvement plans yet. So even talking about what is the problem of practice, what are your priorities, and getting their mindset around it so they then could go back to school and start that conversation with teachers has been very powerful for us, because it's important for us to really say, yes, we want you to define a problem of practice. We want you to define a priority. We want you to think about a theory of action. Let's do it together here so you can get your mind around the process. And then you'll be more equipped to actually do it with your staff, because you're not supposed to do it in isolation. We want to teach you how to do it. We want to go through the questions you have, but we want to set you up for success when you actually go back with your staff so you can have these same conversations. So putting that into practice is really important for us, because the theory is great, but even, when we were thinking about the title, Michael and I have always been struck by collective efficacy is a lot about that belief that you have. But many leaders are asking us more than just like, how do you get that belief? How do you move beyond the belief? How do you actually do that work?
As a superintendent,
Yeah, absolument. Yes, thank you, Peter. Yeah, Michael.
as a superintendent, Sylvie, one of the things that we always did was we took our notes in a 2-column form. When we're in study together, what are the practices that are really impacting me right now, my personal leadership? And then the other column is, okay, what am I learning now that I can facilitate and help guide my staff or the people in which I'm leading to new heights in their development and their work with students? And so that 2-column, those 2 questions work really well in like a 2-column note-taking form. But really where it stemmed from specifically is we were in Washington, D.C. about 2 years ago, and it was just as I was first coming on board with Peter. It was one of the first presentations that we did together, and there was an incredible leader in the front row, came early, sat in the front row. And about halfway through the presentation, Sylvie, we do lots of stand up, talk to your neighbor, small protocols. And it was just an hour workshop, but we still did that then. We walked over because he was looking kind of devastated. And we said, "How are you? What's going on right now in your mind?" And he just said, "I came into this workshop hoping that you would help me fix my teachers. I was coming in for that purpose. And right now, I'm in the middle of your workshop and I'm realizing it's not my teachers that need fixing. It's my own personal mindset and my leadership mindset." So those 2 columns. And he was almost emotional about it. And that solidified the reason of, okay, those 2 critical questions are a key foundation to this book and how it's written.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, because I think this is very powerful. And the work that you have done here in New Brunswick has always been about what are their priorities? What are the school leaders' needs? And sometimes they don't know what their own needs are, because there's so much to think about. It's such a complex position to be in, a great one, but a very complex one. So I do appreciate that it's through the lens of their own work, but then guiding them within their own work, but within their team too. We started to do that as well with NB Lead, is to invite some of their school team members to come in and have those discussions together. So it's been very powerful, those conversations as well. So I'll talking about NB Lead. Through your work, which again was very powerful. The 15 months you spent with our about 50 school principals in creating through their own needs, establishing their own community of practice, and then coming together who had common needs and common problem of practice, and discussing it together, which was again very powerful. So we saw through the NB Lead initiative, we've had some ongoing conversations, because the network is one of the pillars of NB Lead in New Brunswick, and NB Lead is an initiative to support school leaders. Throughout, another pillar is professional learning, and we have all kinds of pillars. But through our ongoing conversations and your ongoing conversations, I'm sure it comes up, is they have many questions, essential questions one of the questions, one of the themes revolve around evidence of impact. So it's one of your three-legged legs from your stool, right? And they're asking themselves and they're asking us, um, how do I know I'm making a difference? What kind of difference am I making? How do I measure the impact that we're having? What impact do I have on my students, on my staff, on my community, right? So as part of these three-legged stool, which I really love, uh, first two legs, which the shared understanding, the joint work, and the evidence of impact. Could you, with these important questions, could you expand and perhaps provide some insights on these important questions that school leaders have? And I know you've worked with our leaders as well. So any insights that you and your work on the book may have?
Oh, I'm totally gonna let Mike take this one.
I noticed that Peter was not leaning in. If you're watching this podcast he was not leaning in at all. So I'm happy to take this one, Sylvie, because
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
you need to know, first of all, the 50 plus leaders that we had a chance to work with fundamentally changed or supported, enhanced who we are as leaders and as authors and as educators from the very first time. You need to know that the culture in New Brunswick is unlike anything that I have seen. And in the last 2 years, I've had a chance to travel through North America and Australia with Peter. And here's some examples. Your 50 leaders came at the beginning, let's say 8:00. They stayed until 3:30. Every single one of the 50 plus leaders filled out the evaluation or the reflection at the end to turn into Peter and myself. Though no one got up and used their phone. No phones rang. No phones rang throughout the workshop. So whatever you're doing with NB Lead, New Brunswick Lead, that those norms really talk to and speak to the importance of adult learning to impact student learning. That speaks volumes to us as presenters. And, 15 months ago, I couldn't have told you that. I recognized it then. I told Peter, it's like, oh my goodness, this is significantly different. But I can now tell you with data, with evidence that that's very unique to you, and you need to continue to flourish with that. I think that the learning part that we have discovered for us and what makes us as what we love about the book and what we love about working in partnerships with somebody like you is when you talk about evidence of impact, it needs to tie to something meaningful, your theory of action and your problem of practice. Those three-legged stools are not silos. If you notice, there's connections between the legs, and that's really the key work of the collaboration. Or you can say the symbol of the seat of the stool is connecting it, and that's where people sit to collaborate. There's lots of analogies you can make about that stool. That really is the key to the long-term pieces. And it is what keeps us fresh as presenters. We're not going in and doing the same presentation 150 times a year. We're needing to work with, let's say, your group in February, and then we need to read all of their reflections to know what we're doing again in March. So we're using that evidence. We're using it as formative assessments. We're sharing that with them. We're modeling the collective leader efficacy process. We're trying to build shared understanding. We're engaging in joint work, and we're doing the evidence of impact. We're modeling that as presenters all throughout those 15 months. And then we're asking them to do it as well. So as a superintendent, you're building a different level of credibility when you're actually engaged in the process with the participants, and you're not just espousing from the front of the room, this is how you should do it, but I'm going to leave and you're going to need to go do it. We're in it with them, if that makes sense. That really is the true evidence of the impact. Peter?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think Michael and I need you and Michael Butler and Rosemary to know how much of an impact you guys have had on us over the past couple of years that we've known you. That's the interesting thing about being a facilitator. Like, I think facilitators of learning need to be transparent about it's a reciprocal learning process.
Correct.
When we started with you, I mean, you contacted me in like end of December and said, "Can your team start in March?" Oh, wait, January. And and
And then I received a response from you, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Peter's emailed me back."
well, yeah, but we, when we talked and we worked as a team. So this is what's important for us. The five of us worked together as a team when we were planning the work and looking at the evidence. And that had an enormous impact on the two of us, because I feel like we grew as partners in this. We grew through the research we were doing. We grew through, when we started writing the book at the same time we're working with you, it was, how do we engage them? How do we do this? Like, and we have so many from New Brunswick, from that first cohort, that still stay in touch with us. And I just remember it was a different experience. It was just a different culture when we would show up and we would talk and hang out. And when you have people saying, this is the issue we're facing, what do we do? I think the easy part of the answer is start with that problem that you want to focus on. We hear a lot about tier 1 instruction. We hear a lot about, how do we engage our English language learners and those kind of things. Start there, and then start thinking about the data you're collecting and how is that actually helping you understand where you are. One of the things that we had a breakthrough on, and it was during February of writing this book, we were working with all of you, is that we were still looking at Bernhardt's data, perceptions, demographics, student learning, and school processes. And I was with Michael and Britt over the weekend, and Mike and I just had this kind of amazing breakthrough where he looked at our theory of action, which was if, then, and so that. And he said, what if we can tie this to leading and lagging data? And that, there's a lot here. And obviously the book, there's a lot there, but the leading data is really that formative assessment data that you're looking at to guide your leadership right now. And the lagging data is what you're looking at. It's that summative data. And what we found is that a lot of leaders were waiting for the summative data. I was working in the States recently, and it was an interesting conversation. There was an assistant principal, and I was talking about problem of practice and looking at data and where we're going to start. And he said, we don't have our state data yet. And I asked him to tell me more. And he just said, well, I don't know if we can really talk about the problem we're facing if I don't have that state data. And I said, it makes me nervous a little bit that what about your leading data? What about your formative data? And he said, I don't know if that's always going to line up. And I said, so that leads to another question. Why wouldn't your formative data kind of align with your summative data? Are you really learning that much from state assessments? Those are the conversations we need to be able to have so you can really hone in on what data you should collect. So the easy answer is yes, choose a problem, define your theory of action. And within that theory of action, within our book, we're helping with the leading and lagging data part. And when you learn that process, you can use it for a lot of other things. And I think the last thing I would say is that I used to have a love-hate relationship with data because I felt like it was used as a hammer and not as a flashlight. To quote a friend of mine, Jonathan Cohen, who used to say that when I was a school principal in New York State. And I have a very different view on it now because I really see it as a flashlight. And if we use it this way, it's going to be very helpful. And, Mike and I are both former leaders, so we understand leadership. I understand building leadership very, very well because I was in that position. But I'm going to be honest, I don't always understand district leadership. Michael was a superintendent for 14 years, an assistant superintendent before that. He understands district leadership. So even when we're talking about evidence, he has been very helpful with me to say, so that might be third grade data that the teachers are collecting, but how is it aligning with the building? So I can do that very well. Well, how is it aligning with the district? And one of the things that we've been doing lately is just working with, and this is a larger picture, but working with a school where the superintendent and their team have a great strategic plan, but the buildings never had a plan that were aligned to it. Now the building has, it's aligned to it. Teachers are aligned to the building, and that makes it easier to actually start focusing on evidence as well. I think part of why evidence becomes confusing is that people are doing so many different things. They don't see where the interconnectedness is. And Michael's been really great from a system standpoint to really focus on what is the aligning data. Even in New Brunswick, I was looking at the 4 Anglophone school districts and the principals, and he said, I see the value in the school principals having their school improvement plans, their academic plans. But what about the whole of New Brunswick? And he was the one who really helped me with that perspective of what do you as New Brunswick need? He was somebody that was guiding that too. So those are all evidence-based conversations and probably way too much information.
Oh, no. Well, I'm actually, no, not at all, Peter. And I really appreciate that, because actually I had another question around the leading and the lagging data and that connection to the theory of action. And I think just to align, how the word alignment is so important, because lots of our leaders, and I'm including myself as a previous vice principal, not everyone is actually comfortable with data. So when you mention, the hammer versus the flashlight, I really appreciate that, because some people still see it as a hammer. And I think more and more within the work that we do here in New Brunswick, we are trying to clarify what this is and how this can support student outcomes, and also how this can support how leaders are doing themselves and being able to read their own practice, and the teacher is reading their own practice. And student outcomes is absolutely essential, but also how are we doing as educators to make sure we have an impact on student outcomes through the results that we're getting from the data. So there's a lot still to learn. I'm including myself in it. And I know my 2 other co-chairs, Michael Butler and Rosemary Southard. It's great to have that partnership with the New Brunswick Teacher Association, with Michael Butler, and the district, one of the directors of schools, Rosemary Southard. It's all things that we're working towards, and it's that alignment piece that's important. So one of the key themes while I was reading, honestly, when I was reading the book, lots of things were happening in my mind, lots of reflection piece, lots of elements that came up. One of the elements that came up was the importance of educators' commitment to continuous learning. And when I talk about leaders, I talk about all kinds of leaders at different levels. It could be here at the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. It could be at the district level, the superintendents, the directors, learning specialists, and absolutely at the school level. And in your chapter 7, you are mentioning Guskey's research in 2025, indicating that PL has not had the desired impact on teaching and learning at this point. And I thought it was interesting, because a big part of my role as one of the co-chairs on NB Lead is that professional learning piece. So you have a little bit of time. Could you elaborate on this and how Lead collectively reinforces the idea around the importance of leaders to see themselves as learners, and how continuous PL impacts this? So just question.
Tom has had an enormous impact on the 2 of us. I've known Tom for a long time now, and he has been, he's a wonderful human. So not just a great researcher, but he's a wonderful human. And I've reached out to him many times. Michael and I have reached out to him and talked to him in person many times. And so one of the big pieces that he's always talking about is just aligning to student outcomes and really understanding not just, and there's a bunch of research around it. So you've got Tom's with professional learning. You've got John Hattie, who obviously we've known for a long time too. who has talked about research that shows that a teacher or a leader might go back and try a strategy, and that used to have a high effect size when they looked at professional learning through that lens. But now they changed it in about 2000 to start looking at whether that strategy had an impact on student learning. So that's what Lead collectively is all about. It's not just your initiatives and strategy and your problem of practice and just defining one. It's about how are you sure it's going to have an impact on student learning? And that goes back to your evidence question too. That's why student learning data is a huge part of this, but also perceptions and all that stuff. Where Tom is concerned, he's always talking about when you're going to go through collaborative inquiry, start with student outcomes. So that's a major question that we focus on. And from a professional learning standpoint, what we've done in our feedback surveys that we've created, we've learned a lot over the past couple of years of just what are good questions to ask. Because I think in the past, surveys used to just be, let's get some generic questions, answer them, and people really like being in the room. We want more than that because we want to understand our impact on the work we're doing. So where Tom has been influential, as has John Hattie, is that we're asking specific questions about not just what strategy did you connect with, but we're asking how did you use that strategy when you've gone back to school? And how has that impacted student outcomes? What evidence do you have to show that? And when we can keep going back to those questions, we don't have to keep changing the questions. We can just go to some of those. It gives us a lot of information about what they're doing, how they're implementing it. But it's also that tweak of, as school leaders and district leaders, you always hear about being instructional leaders. And as a former school leader, I can't speak for Mike on this one, but sometimes that was a frustrating conversation because you have to find the balance between management and instructional leadership. And you've got a lot going on. You've got staff, you've got families, you've got kids, all of those kind of things. So when we're asking you about the strategy you're learning with us and how it's being implemented and how it's impacting student learning, it's giving you that space to practice instructional leadership. And we're not saying you can do it 24/7. But if you can keep going back to that, it's going to be helpful for your own mindset, right? You're going to feel like, okay, I'm not just doing management, I'm focusing on instructional leadership. But at the same time, that student outcome piece is just so important because it also gives you insight into what are we doing that has impact and what are we doing that really doesn't have impact and we don't need to do anymore. Those kind of nuances are what Tom refers to a lot in the research. And that's what we draw on when we're writing a book, but that's also where we draw on when we're facilitating workshops.
I think Peter did a beautiful job responding to your question about Gusky and the student outcomes. I think I would do the and. This strategy because we've done it with New Brunswick Lead, but Dr. Robinson's work, we kind of put up, here are 5 different elements of, what makes a good school, let's say. And we said, what rank the order in terms of effect size. Right. And the one that comes out on top is when the leader actively engages in the professional learning and with their staff. So instead of sending a group of teachers to go learn something, and the leader is not engaged with that, doesn't ask questions, that creates this silo of the teachers developing something. Or principals go and learn something and the superintendent's not there. You're not building what Michael Fullen talks about, that thread of coherence from, let's say, a government's board level to superintendent to principal to teachers. We know the importance of the leader supporting, participating with. So they can lead it in the communities with parents and newsletters to support the staff's implementation of whatever PD, professional development, is occurring. You model that, Sylvie. You did not miss a session. You were with us all along the way. So not only did those 50 plus principals that engage with us in the content, you engaged in the content. So you're able to go to your directors and share, here's what we're doing. Here's the vision of how we can go bigger. That's an example of taking it to the next level and not having silos or random acts or pockets of improvement, but really that thread of coherence throughout the system.
And I would add one thing to that too, I know we're going to be wrapping it up, but I am hoping that what Michael and I have done in New Brunswick and all other places, and I'm hoping this is what the book does too, is make those we know that principals feel insecure about leading the learning back in their school sometimes, because we have lots of research to show that principals feel confident going into classrooms and content that they taught, but they don't feel confident going into other classrooms or content that they didn't teach. We also have research to show that leaders don't feel comfortable leading the learning because what if they don't know the answer? And I'm hoping that one of the things that we've done in the book, but also what we've done with New Brunswick and everywhere else, is that we've made leaders less afraid to get messy and do that, promoting participating in teacher learning development, whether in their own school or with their own district, with strategies and protocols that they've learned with us. But it's okay to not know the answer. What's important is to actually engage in those discussions and engage in that learning back at school. So making sure that what they learn with us, they feel comfortable leading when they go back. And, Michael and I are going to be doing a train the trainer model in one of the states in the United States. And they're going to ultimately take our work and go across the state with it. So that's really important to us too, to make sure that they feel comfortable leading the learning after they're with us and after they read the book.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. To your point, you've said a few key words, and words are powerful, is the creating the space. And I know you're using that language a lot in your book. And also we say creating the conditions. So it's not, we don't know everything. I don't know everything. No one does. But it's about, where am I at? What are my strengths, and what are some of the challenges that I have, and then closing the gap about themselves as leaders, but about their students and their staff and their school community. So there's the creating the space is, I think, one of the leadership key that is important. And as you mentioned, being a lead learner as part of those 5 components. And even Michael Folan talks about the lead learner in a few of his books and the research piece. So it's nothing new, right? We've been saying some things, not I, but research has been showing evidence that this is working, this is making an impact. But now it's just to provide that space for it to happen, for sure. Yeah. So just to conclude, I know this is your second book. I want to congratulate you again for this upcoming Lead collectively from belief to action to impact, which is powerful. So excited. But you did also publish a book, Leading with Intention, that I see you, Michael, you have one behind you, and Peter, you have the other one behind you. So for this book, what makes this book, just to, cognizant of the time too, but what makes this writing of this book and how you make it come alive with your direct work with your leaders different from, other projects that you have engaged in?
For me, it actually, and this is one of the reasons why, when we were talking with our editor, Pam Berkman, about doing this podcast interview, you were the name that came up first. I learned so much by the back and forth with working with NB leads. So it came alive because the voices of the leaders that we worked with, and I was working in some other places too, which we talk about in the book, but the voices of those leaders that we've worked with really came alive in the pages. And I know that's going to sound cliche to some people, but it's really not. There was something very powerful about writing the book and learning at the same time. Like I always say that I don't write a book because I have an expertise in an area. I write a book because that's the space I want to learn in. And I think that truly came out in a way that no other book that I've written has, actually. I've talked to Mike recently and just said, I've loved the books that I've written on my own. and they've always gotten good feedback, but this book has been the best work I've been a part of. And I also think it's not just because of the leaders we worked with and their voices coming in and their questions coming in, and we want to help with that. I think it's also because I was learning so much from Michael at the same time, where we were actually developing our partnership in a much stronger way. So all of those things were kind of happening simultaneously at the same time we're, facilitating workshops. So I just think there's a lot of what makes this book different, I think, from most is that we have a we have a process that we know works. We have a placemat that people can use. We have stories of people that have deeply impacted us. And I think that all comes out in the book in a really authentic and credible way.
Wow, it's hard to beat what Peter just shared, Sylvie. Well, first of all, thank you for asking such thoughtful questions about the book. You've made us think differently already regarding, it's like
Third book.
regarding regarding the book, and I'm just grateful to you. I don't know quite the words I want to share with you, and I hope it sounds great to our listeners, but what makes this book different is the three of us on the screen and those listening probably have read a lot of professional development books. And I think what makes this book different is it's, I'm going to use the word emotional. It's emotionally charged for the reader, for the learner. And my hope is that it captures the head and heart and brings back the whole reason why you went into education and inspires you to lead in a way that impacts both students and staff.
Wow, that's well said.
I love the word emotional and the way you explained, Michael, at the beginning, where you have the story which started with the student that impacted you, one of the students that impacted you the most, about Jimmy, and the book is ending with, the continuous powerful story about Jimmy. So I think we all have that in mind when we read the book about a powerful student, staff, community member that had an impact on our work. So I want to thank you so much for, you're thanking me, but I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity, again, I just don't want to say interview, because it's really a discussion. I feel it was a great discussion around your upcoming new release, your upcoming new book. And I am really fortunate to be part of this discussion today with you. And I'm going to add, I and the two other co-chairs on NB Lead and our principals have and will, again, at some point, looking forward to working with you. And we have learned so much from both of you. I don't say that because this is a podcast or the viewers and listeners will be listening to this, but I really want to reiterate the importance of the partnership we have created with you, but also the connection and also the friendship we have created. So I'm looking forward to having the actual book in my hands when it comes out. But congratulations again to both of you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Sylvie, very much.
Thank you.
Michael Nelson, I'm a little bit worried about our job now, because I think Sylvie Arseneau she was really fantastic, and it was good to see her again. It actually brought back all of those memories of working with New Brunswick over the past 15 months.
I know. I couldn't help but the smile throughout the whole interview process. Yeah, she is delightful. She has a beautiful voice. She has a way of asking questions and then capturing, summary pieces. And it was a delight to talk with her about our book, Lead Collectively.
Yeah, you know what I like? In the past, you and I have interviewed each other at the kickoff of each season and all that stuff, and we're changing the way we're doing the podcast now. We're going to release one every month. Um, but it was just when Pam Berkman and Morgan talked to us about, how we would do an interview, and we mentioned Sylvie. I'm glad her name came up, and because she really did do a fantastic job of interviewing us, and plus she has the inside knowledge of there were a few things. If the work we did wasn't valuable to her, she would have said, "No, I'm really busy. I've got to do my hair," something like that. But in fact, not only did she immediately respond with a yes, but she also asked a lot of very thoughtful questions, and she has the inside knowledge because she was a part of all of the work we were doing, both when we would do whole group and when we were doing the communities of practice approach with New Brunswick as well. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, I just love the fact that there were 3 individuals from New Brunswick that wrote our foreword. And, in preparing for this, I needed to dive back into the book again. I know that might sound strange to our listeners, but the book was written and turned in, about 6 months ago. And even though we've gone through the editing process, that was really, compartmentalized to this portion of the book. And so, the last couple of days, I've just had a chance to reread the entire book. And what I love so much that didn't necessarily come up because she didn't want to talk about herself was the foreword that they wrote from New Brunswick. The 3 individuals is it beautifully. Not oftentimes. Sometimes forwards don't connect to the book, and sometimes the afterwards don't connect to the book.
Yeah.
I love both the forward and the afterward of this book. They really encapsulate the book well.
And I think it's very special when you can ask 3 people that you worked with who you didn't know a couple of years ago, right? We didn't know them a couple of years.
Right.
We asked them to write the forward to the book, and they did a beautiful job. And there's something just for me very powerful about having people you actually developed a relationship and worked with. They were quote unquote the clients, and they wrote the forward. I've never done that before in any of the books that I wrote alone. So that was just really special. So great interview, Michael. Until next time.
All right. Can't wait.
All right. Thank you to everybody listening. We really appreciate the feedback, and we very much appreciate the fact that you're taking time to listen to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. So until next time, Michael.
Take good care.